I would like to welcome everyone again to today's Msdn webcast, VSTO, straight from the experts, Ken Getz. And now without any further delay, I'm going to turn the floor over to today's first presenter, Mike Hernandez.
Hi everybody, thank you. My name is Mike Hernandez and I'm the Product Manager for Visual Studio Tools for Office. And I'd like to welcome you all today to our webcast straight from the experts with VSTO expert and a good friend of mine, Mr. Ken Getz. Ken, how are you?
I'm great, thank you. How are you today?
Well, I'm doing just fine. I got my Starbucks halfway done and I'm excited and ready to go, and I think we're going to have a good webcast here.
Good.
So let's get started. What we're going to cover is I'm going to do a brief introduction to VSTO. There's some points that I'd like to cover just to make sure that we're all in context and we're all on the same page on some things. And then we'll sit down and talk to Ken for a few moments and get to know him a little more and see what he's been doing, and then have him talk about some stuff he's doing with VSTO. And at that time, he'll show us some demos and talk about some code. I'll ask him a couple of things that you guys should know, and then we'll both do a couple of closing remarks, and we'll open it up for Q&A. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and go to the first slide here. With the advent of the 2007 Microsoft Office system, we now have a really good unified solutions platform upon which we can build solutions based on Office that utilize data and resources from enterprise systems. And this is significant because there are a lot of customers who have large investments in enterprise systems such as SAP and Siebel and things of that nature. And there's a lot of data there that is very valuable and that could be utilized by a lot of information workers. And yet there's a number of information workers that aren't necessarily trained on those systems. So what the Office 2007 system platform allows us to do is to build applications that can access that data and surface it into applications in Microsoft Office. Now, Visual Studio Tools for the Microsoft Office system, VSTO, is our premier set of developers tools with which developers can create Office business applications. These set of tools allow developers to create Office applications from within Visual Studio. And there's a lot of excitement there because of the types of applications that you can create and the benefits and advantages that you realize from working in the Visual Studio environment. Oops, I think I might have hit one, two, there you go. Oh. Excuse me, I have my fingers going through these little down arrows a little too quickly. Visual Studio Tools for Office you can think of as the bridge between Office and the Studio. It enables Visual Studio developers to see Office as a legitimate first-class project in their Visual Studio project arsenal. And it enables Office developers to finally see Visual Studio as a valid, beneficial development environment. And so VSTO is what provides that bridge between the two camps and allows them to finally come together and to be really, really productive. And I think this graphic actually shows that pretty well. Now, the 2007 Office system itself provides all the infrastructure that developers need to build these types of applications and to support them with various tools and resources. There's workflow, there's search, there's the new business data catalog, there's support for SharePoint, there's unified collaboration, there's just tons of infrastructure that the Office system now has to build these types of applications. So we're really excited to see where our customers are going to go with this. And indeed, we've had a number of partners and a number of customers who have already begun working with us and creating really, really good, viable applications. We work quite closely with the Office team, and we're seeing case studies and we're seeing customers that are using the new 2007 Office system to build these applications that are leveraging their back-end data and surfacing it in ways that are very intuitive and familiar to the end users that they have in their companies. Now, this whole thing with the 2007 Office system brings up a new way of thinking about how you build applications. And indeed, there is a new way of thinking of building these apps and what we're terming Office business applications. So again, basically the strategy behind building an Office business application is that you're leveraging some back-end system that you have, whether it's a SQL Server database or an enterprise relationship management system or a SAP system, anything that the company has made a huge investment in and has gotten reams and reams of data that now need to be surfaced to more people, to a broader audience. OBAs allow developers to surface that and to utilize it for their customers, in this case the end users. So where we're seeing a lot of movement and where we're expecting movement in this new breed of applications is within enterprise companies and with ISVs. And as you can see by this graphic here, I'm sure many of you have heard of something called Duet and Dynamics. And indeed, these were first generation Office business applications where they were, like in the case of Duet, where they were hitting the back-end system such as SAP. So now that we've got the new 2007 Office system, we now have more of a unified platform and an infrastructure from which we can build these OBAs, as we're calling them. And we see a lot of movement in terms of the ISVs and the corporate environments where we expect there to be a lot of development and movement for Office business applications. Now, what are some of the developer benefits of taking Office and Visual Studio? Well, there's three categories of benefits that you can think of. First of all, developing with Office and Visual Studio enables developers to provide their users with a familiar, intuitive interface. Developers can now utilize key user interface elements in the 2007 Microsoft Office system to surface that back-end data and those back-end systems, as I said before, into Office business applications. So for example, we can take data from a back-end SQL Server data store and surface it into Excel, or surface it into Word, or surface it into Outlook. And so these applications that are being used by millions of users on a daily basis now become the user interface and the front end to those back-end systems. So developers have a real easy means now of creating user interfaces without a lot of work. Traditionally, developers have to do a lot of work in creating WinForm applications or web applications or things of that nature. And certainly there are still a number of situations where those types of applications are definitely advantageous and beneficial. In the situations where you have a huge number of information workers that are using Office on a daily basis and need to see that back-end data, then being able to take advantage of the UI that Microsoft Office provides is really beneficial. And so being able to develop with Office and with Visual Studio enables developers to do that. Secondly, the two provide a very rapid application development experience for developers. The VSTO, historically, we've always tried to make sure that developers can focus on the business intelligence that they need to work with and the business logic that they need to work with, rather than the mundane plumbing that goes with coding on a day-to-day basis. So from its inception, we've always tried to wrap common developer tasks into very simple procedures so that developers could, say, like drag and drop data sources onto an Excel spreadsheet and not have to worry about writing code for the data set and the binding source and all of those types of things. And we've continued this throughout each inception of VSTO. So as we move forward with Visual Studio Tools for Office 2nd Edition, for example, that particular version allows developers to create business applications based on the 2007 Office system. And for example, we allow you to create ribbons, to customize the ribbons. And right now in the current product, you do that through the XML file that's generated for the ribbon. With the upcoming version that is going to be a fully integrated part of Visual Studio Orcus, we have now provided a designer, a ribbon designer, so that developers don't have to worry about manipulating the XML, although they still can if they want to. But they can use this designer to literally drag and drop elements from the Windows Form Controls toolbox, let's say, onto the ribbon, and then write code that's necessary to automate any of the processes that they need to do based on interacting with that ribbon control. So we always try to make a very rapid application development experience for developers. And as we continue to work with our program and work with our customers and get feedback, that will continue to evolve, and we'll have more and more designers and more easy ways of doing development. So with Visual Studio Tools for Office and working within Visual Studio Orcus, it's very easy for developers to create Office-based applications. And then finally, the use of both of these products enables you to create, as I said before, Office business applications. And so by doing so, almost by default, what you're doing when you create an Office business application is you're enabling the streamlining of tasks and business processes, making it much easier for your end users to do their jobs and making them more productive. And as you know, anybody who's been working with computers and with Microsoft products for the longest time, one of our big focuses has always been to try and make things easier for end users, to increase their productivity and to streamline those processes. And I think as we move forward with the tools that we're providing and with the stuff that the Office team is doing with Microsoft Office, I think we continue to strive toward that goal, and we continue to increase the ease of use and the streamlining that developers can do with these products. So these are basically the three areas where developers really get a lot of benefits when they work with Office and Visual Studio together. Now in terms of our roadmap, we have had VSTO since 2003, and that's when we first introduced the whole notion of writing managed code behind Office applications. And we started out with Word and Excel. With the advent of VSTO 2005, we added InfoPath and Outlook to that mix. And we enabled custom document actions panes, being able to put controls on the document and the Excel spreadsheet surfaces. We enabled caching data in documents. We had server-side data processing. A number of things that were beneficial to developers are what we added into this particular version of the product. And as we move forward, we come to Visual Studio Tools for Office 2nd Edition. Now that is an edition that we decided to release because of the impending release of Office 2007. And I should provide a little context as to why this was the case. The VSTO team is a small team that literally sits between Office and Visual Studio. And if you remember that one graphic that I showed that had the bridge between the two cities, and one of the cities was Office and one of the cities was Visual Studio, that's exactly the way that the organization works. So that we are part of the Visual Studio product line, but we provide tools for working with Microsoft Office products. So basically what we have to do is we have to ensure that we are continuing to evolve as part and parcel of the Visual Studio line, and yet our major versions are delivered with major versions of Visual Studio. But at the same time, we have to make sure that we are supplying tools to our customers that allow them to work with the latest version of Office. So in the case of Visual Studio Tools for Office 2nd Edition, it turned out that Office was going to be released earlier than our major version of VSTO, which is coming up in the Orcus timeframe. So our team decided we have to make sure that our customers can build applications using the 2007 Office system. So let's get on the horn here, and let's make sure that we can provide them with tools that they can at least start building these applications. And then as we move into our Orcus product, we can add more functionality and we can add more applications. So in VSTO SE, we provided support for the 2007 Office system. In particular, there were like 6 particular applications that we supported, and I think that's Word, Excel, Outlook, InfoPath, Visio, and PowerPoint. And not only did we supply support for those 6 apps, we also included support for 5 of those in the Office 2003 edition. So not only can you create app-level add-ins for those applications in Office 2007 system, you can also create add-ins for Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Visio, and that's it. You can't do it for the 2003 version of InfoPath. So we've provided a lot of features in that version as well. And as we move toward the new version of Visual Studio Orcus that's coming up here soon, we are providing even more support. Now we're providing support for Microsoft Project, and we're adding more app-level add-ins for more client applications, and we're doing more server-side programming. We're going to be supporting Microsoft SharePoint workflow projects. And so as you see through this graphic, the more that the product has evolved, the more applications we've been able to support. And so any investment that you make in these tools is certainly one that's going to be long-term. So with that little bit of context, let's talk to Mr. Getz here.
Mike.
How are you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Good.
That was a lot of marketing information there.
Well, you know, got to put stuff in context to make sure everybody knows about the Office Business Applications and the 2007 Office System and how that ties into VSTO.
That's correct.
So tell the audience a little bit about yourself and MCW Technologies.
I've been playing with Visto since it first came out in 2002 or 2003 or so, and playing with Microsoft Technologies for the umpteen years before that. I've actually known Mr. Hernandez, our esteemed leader here, since about 1995 or 1994. And it turns out, Mike, we have something in common.
What's that?
We share a birthday.
Yes, we do, actually.
And we found that out, I'm guessing, 10 years ago or so?
Yep.
And I decided that you've had your first senior moment. Mike, by the way, for those listening, is a year older than I am. So we're in the hallway outside of his office. And he looks at me and he says, "So Ken, when's your birthday?" And I look at him like, "Have you lost your mind?" And I realize he knows there's something special about my birthday, but just can't remember what exactly that it is. And I look at you and I say, "I don't know, perhaps the same day as yours?" So yes, you've had your first senior moment.
Yes, and they're continuing as we speak.
Yeah. Yes. So, what's up?
So tell us what you do with MCW Technologies.
We do writing and consulting and training and mentoring. At this point, mostly writing white papers and examples for Microsoft.
And how you guys like working with VSTO so far?
Well, being as we all do, I guess it must be pretty good. We have, of course, Robert Green in our staff, who was basically in your shoes a few years back.
Yep.
And Brian Randall and I, we do a lot of work with Visto, so we enjoy it a lot. Though I must confess, we don't write applications, we mostly write demos. It's a different world.
Yep.
And that's what I was hoping to demonstrate today, was just a demo that shows how you can use some of this data. It's interesting, you did mention you can expose SQL Server data, you said, in Word or Excel or Outlook. And I'm thinking, guess what product I decided to use for my demo? PowerPoint, the one you didn't happen to mention.
That's okay. That's a good thing, though, because one of the major reasons that we included PowerPoint support in this version is because we've had a lot of feedback from customers for the longest time about getting support for PowerPoint. And one of the major reasons that I mentioned the new graphic that we have that shows the bridge graphic and the fact that we're a small team and how this has evolved is simply because being the small team that we are, we want to make sure that whatever tools that we provide in the product are good, they're sound, they're solid, they've been tested, and we can stand behind them. And so as such, there's a lot of work that goes into the product in terms of testing and making sure that it works, and that if a customer is using it under a certain scenario, that it's going to work as expected. As such, there are times when we have to make very critical decisions as to resources that we can commit to ensuring that the product is solid when we put it out and adding new features to the product before it gets out. So there are, for the longest time, we really wanted to put PowerPoint support in there. We were just still ramping up and getting our resources going and making sure that the product was solid. So we had to postpone it. And I'm happy to say that with this version, we were finally able to add it and put it on board of the list of the Office applications that we support.
Shall we not talk about the one that's missing?
Which one is that?
The one that's missing?
Which is?
Access.
Ah, yes.
Yes,
my beloved little Access.
You promise next time, right?
I'm hoping so. I'm crossing my fingers.
Yeah, we're going to make you promise.
Ken asks that question very pointedly because prior to my working for Microsoft, I used to have my own database consulting business, and a large chunk of that was doing Access development.
And I seem to have spent a great number of years programming Access. So here we are.
Yeah, so it's a point that we like, that's near and dear to our hearts.
So should we do a demo?
Sure. Why don't you show us what you've got going there with PowerPoint?
Okay, so I do have a demo that works with Visto and PowerPoint, and now I'm going to switch to my own desktop, and hopefully you can see my desktop soon.
It's there.
It's there. And we'll create a new project just like you would any other project. I've already created the one I'm going to play with. It's a PowerPoint add-in, and you can see you select from the list of project types an Office add-in. I choose PowerPoint, click OK.
Before you go any further, Ken,
Mm-hmm.
can I mention just something here real quick?
Okay.
You notice that on his tree over there, the project types, there's 2003 add-ins and 2007 add-ins. The 2003 add-ins you get if you have Visual Studio Tools for Office 2005.
Not SE.
Not SE. The 2007 add-ins you get when you get Visual Studio Tools for Office 2nd Edition.
Okay,
so
that's what we're going for here.
Using them together, you get the whole palette.
Okay. Well, I'm going to go ahead. I've already created this, so I'm going to put it away for now. And you notice that when you create the project, you end up with a class. There's this add-in.vb. I chose VB. It works the same in C#. Doesn't really matter. And I'm going to use VB today. And we can add code to this class and other classes involved in this project. Notice that they hand you stubs for a startup and a shutdown event. There are other events we could play with for the add-in, but they figure you're likely to want to put code in those, so they give us stubs for those too. Now in this demonstration, I'm going to want to add a custom task pane. You've all seen task panes in Office applications. It's really easy to add your own. To do that, I'm going to go to the Project menu, and from the Project menu, I'll choose to add a new user control. Because really, a task pane is nothing more than a user control. So I'll choose Add User Control from the menu. When I do that, it creates a normal user control, and I'll call mine Northwind Task Pane. Click Add, and we've now added to our project what looks like a gray blob. At runtime, that actually will be a task pane that shows up at the right-hand side of the window in PowerPoint. It's drag and drop. You can disconnect it from the window and so on. So at this point, I need to add some code to make this thing show up. So I'll go to my add-in and view the code. Now I will say, just for those listening, Mike, that I did write a white paper that covers this exact demo. And someday it will be available somewhere online, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Hopefully sooner than later.
Sooner than later. Okay. So at the top of this class, which we were just looking at, I'm going to type import statements just to save me some typing, which is Microsoft.office.tools, which provides the namespace for the task pane stuff. Okay, now I'm going to need some code to make that task pane appear. And rather than making people watch me laboriously type, I've done the place the snippets on the toolbox sort of trick. And you can see the code I've replaced there. I create a variable of type custom task pane, set to nothing. And then when the add-in starts up, I'll create an instance of that task pane, give it a name, Northwind Data, that appears at the top, set its width, and make it visible. Now, I'm not saying it's a great idea to always make these things visible at startup, but for demonstration purposes, that's what I am going to do. Okay, if I was to save and run this at this point, it would start up PowerPoint for me and show that custom task pane with absolutely nothing in it. So that's not all that interesting. So for now, I'm going to actually try to get some data in there. My goal is to use the Northwind sample database. It's always Northwind. It's just easier than AdventureWorks to play with. So I'm going to add some data from the Northwind sample database and use it in this custom task pane. To do that, I need to add the data. And one way to get that data is to use the Server Explorer. Now, if I open up the Server Explorer window, you see that I've already connected to the Northwind sample database on my instance of SQL Server that's running locally. If you don't have Northwind running locally, you want to do this demo, you need to get a copy from somewhere. In any case, I'll go to my Data menu, and on the Data menu, you can choose to add a new data source. So I'll choose Add New Data Source. And a data source to, you know what, I'm stepping back, because what I forgot to mention is the Visto team did this amazingly wonderful thing. And that is when you build a normal Windows application, often you're doing a forms over data application. You got forms, you want to show data. Amazingly, the Visto team didn't recreate their own UI and paradigm for this. They just used the WinForms paradigm for this. So there's nothing new to learn. If you built a Windows application, you can build a data-bound Visto add-in. No problem. So I'll choose database just like I would for Windows Form. I have a connection string. I have a connection ready to go because I set it up in my Server Explorer. I'll click Next. And here's my connection string, and I'll save it in my configuration file. And from this database, I'm going to pick information on categories and products. I love Northwind. It's like embedded in my brain at this point. There's no way to forget the schema of Northwind. Okay, so let's click Finish here. Oops, I didn't want to do that. All my code counts on the data set having a different name than that. So let me just do it real fast again because it's too much trouble to change it. Database, I'm going to run through that real quickly again. Choose the same. Funny thing about those built-in data sets, once you add them, they really don't like having their names changed. Northwind data set. There we go. And now I'll be all set. So my code won't break later on. Okay, now if you didn't already have a connection, you could have added one before you set up that connection. And at this point, of course, I have Northwind data set. If I open it up, it's a standard schema for the data that I've requested. Now, the great thing about using these WinForms tools is you can configure new queries. Right now, there's a built-in table adapter that knows how to get all the data from the categories table and the products table, but I want to be able to filter the information in the products table based on a certain category. Easy to do. And this has nothing to do with Visto. Sorry, Mike. So here, I'm going to add a new query, and I just right-clicked and chose Add and then Query from the context menu. And this lets me create a new query to retrieve data from Northwind SQL Server database. I'll use SQL statements, and all I'm really going to do is use a select which return rows, and probably in real life you'd want to do this with a stored procedure, but it's demo land. I love writing demos. No one holds you accountable for anything. I'll click Next, and now I'll modify this SQL expression to say where category ID equals at category ID. And amazingly, the WinForms tools just managed to supply that value based on a parameter we'll pass in. They wrapped this all up in a method, so it makes it really easy to work with. Now, there are those who will be scared of these tools, thinking they hide stuff from you. They don't. They just create stuff for you. They just write code for you. So I'm going to name the two methods they're going to create, fill by category ID and get data by category ID. One of them returns a data table. One of them fills a data table you pass to them. So in this case, I'm just going to use, most likely, the one that returns a data table. I'll click Finish. I'm all done. And you can see that new query at the bottom of that products data, at the products table there. All right, well, it's time to lay out our task pane and bind it to this data. So let me close this down. Takes a second to close. There we go. And I'm going to modify the layout of my task pane. Here it is. You can see it's all there. Now I need an image control, and I need some couple drop downs and a button, and no one wants to watch me laboriously do this. So what I'm going to do is open up the code. Well, first of all, this is just a user control. I can easily drag controls from my toolbox onto that, but I'm not going to because it takes too long. Instead, I'm going to open up the code. I love this part about Windows Forms, and replace the whole initialize component procedure here with one that I've already written. If only designing forms was that easy in real life. Magic, we have a custom task pane. Now I didn't really do anything that you couldn't have done. I just saved the time of setting the various properties to hook these things up. Now we need to also, at this point, once we've laid out the task pane, and remember, I didn't do anything you couldn't do. I just didn't drag and drop the controls. We need to, at this point, hook up the data binding. Well, let's do that. Each category has, if you'll remember in the Northwind database, a really ugly photograph. It's funny, the history of Northwind, this came about with when Access 1 shipped back in, 1993, 1994, I forget which. And at that point, they didn't want to beef up the database with big pictures, and I believe digital cameras weren't quite then what they are now, and actually these are drawings anyway. But they're really low res, and these images have hung out all this time the same hideous images.
They stood the test of time.
They stood the test of time. And the employees, actually, the employee pictures, the employee table, are all people that worked on the Access team, and over the years I grew to know several of them by their real names, not their Northwind names. Okay, anyway, so we need the categories. I'll choose the picture field here, and I've now bound this control to the picture field in that table. I can do the same for these drop-down lists here. For category, for example, let me double-click this so people can see it better. Make it a little smaller so it fits on my screen. And let's go to the data source property. There it is. And choose my data source. It's going to be the categories binding source. Now notice when I bound that image to a field in the category table, the tools automatically created some objects on my form, some binding objects. And this is exactly the same behavior as you get on a normal WinForms application. So I can bind to that category's binding source, set the display member to be what? Category name, because I want to choose a category, and set the value member to be the item I want to propose the value of this drop-down list, which is category ID. Okay, we've got it. At this point, I will save and run this to demonstrate what we've done so far. I pressed F5 basically to run this, and the project knows to run the host application, adding my add-in as an add-in to the host. And look, there's my task pane, seeing right there on the right. Now I can choose a category, and I didn't hook this up. Well, good, I meant to do that. We got to write some code to fill that data set. So we go back to our code. Here we go. And of course, it always helps to actually write the code that you need. And this has to happen when the task pane loads itself. Let me go find that event. That will be the load event of the custom task pane. We're going to have to go out and fill the data set. So I'll double-click that, bringing up the load event handler, and I'm going to replace that, or add this code right here, which calls the fill method of our categories table adapter, telling it which table to fill. Northwind dataset.categories. Sorry about that. I could say I meant to do that, but I actually didn't. Let me save it and run it once again. And now, when PowerPoint loads up, in theory, we should see, there we are. Now notice that I have mucked with my categories table over many months of playing with the database, and I've managed to remove the images from beverages and condiments, but I do have confections and dairy products and so on. So clearly, those two items are bound to the same data set, retrieving data from the same source. Now our goal will be to select a category, select a product, and then insert the product you've selected into a slide. So you can create slides based on products. Now it's really low tech. It's not going to be attractive, but at least it'll show that you can. So let me quit PowerPoint, go back to Visual Studio. I love the way that you can flip back and forth as if it was a Windows Forms application. It used to be to write and manage code for these things, you'd have to switch back and forth from one environment to the other. This way, it's really easy, and what's more, I won't demonstrate it here. I could put a breakpoint here, and we could debug through our code because it's all hooked together in Visual Studio. Okay, well, we need now to fill the products when I choose a category. And that would happen, if I go back to the Designer, in the selected index changed event of the category here. Now to make that happen, I need a procedure which I'll call to do that work. So let me go get that event handler. There it is. Of course, I need this fill products procedure, which I don't seem to have put here. So let me go get it. I will type it myself. Private sub fill products. And what is fill products going to do? It's going to take the products table adapter. Oh, I can't do this yet. You know why? Because I haven't yet created the products table adapter. So let's put this all away for the moment. And come back out of here. And let's go actually hook up the binding on the combo box. So for the products, we need the same sort of binding. Let's go to its data source. We're doing the same thing we did before. Data source. I'll choose another data source. It'll be a project data source, Northwind dataset. And of course, I didn't get the right thing, so let's try it again. Let's go back to data source. Sometimes that dialog box can get in your way. Other data sources, Northwind dataset. There it is, products. And now I can choose the display member which is going to be what? Product name, and the value member, which tells it which field to bind to, and that's the product ID. Okay, so now we're ready to hook these two things together. I want to select a category, and when I do, I want to filter the product. Should be pretty easy to do. Let's go look at the code. Okay, and at this point, let's see if I can hook this up. I believe I just typed the name wrong here. Yep, I called it Get Product. I really meant to call it Fill Products. No, it's the wrong one. I didn't type the right code. Okay, well, let me go type it in then. This is what happens when you create these demos on the fly really quickly. I need a private sub called Fill Products, and it's going to use the table adapter which we just created, products table adapter dot fill by. Remember that method I added? A query called fill by category ID. And where's the category ID going to come from? It's coming from Northwind dataset dot products, and we're getting the value from the combo box, category combo box dot selected value. There we go. So we're going to call that method, and it's going to fill the products table adapter on demand. So when I select an index in the category combo box, probably need to type the right name of this thing. After all that effort, I still managed to type it wrong. Here we'll call fill products. So when a user selects a category, we'll fill the correct products. Now most likely, in the load event handler, I also want to, at that point, fill the products. So I'll modify that. I think we're done. I have the code to fill the categories. When I choose a category, fill the products. Let's test and see if it works. Press F5 to run this thing. Okay, it seems like it worked. If I choose a category, here's a list of products. I can choose a product from the list. What I want to be able to do is insert that product into PowerPoint. Now, everything we've done up to now is just Windows Forms data binding. It's time to actually work with the host application. To do that, I need to add code that runs when I click this button. So at this point, I'm going to double-click that button to bring up its click event handler. And here, I'm going to add a procedure called Insert Information. Let's see what it does. This is the one that interacts with the host application. And in the white paper from which this comes, I just created multiple add-ins, one for PowerPoint, one for Word, one for Excel, and the only difference between the three was this one procedure, because this is all you have to change to make it work. And what is this doing? If I go full screen here, you can see that first of all, it gets the product. Do I have a get product procedure? Did I add that in yet? Let's go look. There's get product, which returns the value from the product list that you chose from, and then we get a reference to the PowerPoint application. As long as there's a presentation loaded, there might not be one, we get a reference to the active presentation. Once we have that, well, if there's not one loaded, we add a new presentation, get a reference to a new slide, which we'll add, and this is just using the PowerPoint object model to interact with PowerPoint. Because we have access to the full PowerPoint object model, we can do with PowerPoint whatever we want. At this point, I'm going to generate data from my data set, getting information about the category and the product, and then I'm going to slam that into a text frame on the slide. Okay, so all we have to do now is call that from the button click, Insert Information. Okay, I'll save it once again and run it once again, and now we've added code to stuff information into that PowerPoint slide. So let me make a new slide. Actually, I think this demo does make a new slide. Let's pick one, insert selected product, and look, we've generated a slide with information about the data you selected. Okay, we want to see it again. Let's choose another one. There we go. Now, I really wanted to be able to insert the picture as well. The problem is the PowerPoint object model, and hopefully someone on the team is listening, the PowerPoint object model, and actually all of Office, provides no way to take an image in memory and add it to a slide. There's no way to make that happen. You have to save it to disk and load the image from a file. And I refuse in demos to do things that make me that uncomfortable. It really bugs me to have to save an image to disk And what is that picture of? I can't even tell. In any case, to save it to disk and then reload it to put on the slide, we need some way, if anyone's listening, in Office applications to take a stream of bytes and take those bytes and put them onto a document. We don't have that at this point. Okay, so we've got this working, but there are some issues. For example, if I close this, how do I get it back? Mike? The answer is, I'll tell you, you can't. So we have a problem. We need some user interface that allows me to open and close that custom task pane. And in general, if you ever create a custom task pane, you also must provide a ribbon customization so the user has some way to open and close that task pane.
Yes, and that's definitely a best practice.
Yeah, it'd be a real bad idea if the user could close it and you gave them no way to put it back. So adding a ribbon is pretty easy. Mike, do I have 5 more minutes to do this?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, well, let's go for it. To add a ribbon customization is really easy. We just have to go to the project, choose Add New Item, and on the Add New Item dialog box, you have an option for ribbon support. Now, I could change the name of the ribbon. I don't have a reason to, so I'll leave it as Ribbon 1. And you'll see this adds to your project a VB class, or a C# class, and some XML markup. The XML markup, if we look here, describes where you're going to put your customization and what goes on it. Obviously, I don't have time today to go into detail on this. There's lots and lots of information on the web about this. What I want to do is replace that markup with my own. My own markup, and I didn't do a very good job of that, so let's try again. My own markup here is going to add a group called Custom Task Panes Group that says Insert Northwind Data. It's got a button on it, it's actually a toggle button, and it's going to run some code later on. If I just ran this right now, we would see, well, actually not quite yet, we would see a new button, but it wouldn't do anything. Now, for those of you who haven't done a ribbon customization in Visto, there's a couple things you need to do to make it happen. First of all, the add-in has code built in to go look for your ribbon customization. And when you add the support for the ribbon, they write the code to set up your ribbon, but they comment it out. And the reason for that is there are other kinds of extensions to your add-in that might be there. For example, a custom form region in Outlook. So they can't just add this code because it might then override someone else's customization. So here's how it works. The add-in calls this method, and this method gets passed a GUID, a globally unique identifier, which identifies the kind of thing we're looking for. In this case, we're looking for the ribbon extensibility interface. That's the GUID we're looking for. And if we have something that matches that, then we pass over the new ribbon. There is down here a class called Ribbon 1. Look, there it is. There's our Ribbon 1 class, and it defines the behavior for our ribbon. Now here, we need some way to retrieve that XML content. The ribbon must supply a method called getCustomUI that retrieves the XML and hands it back. Now, the Visto designers didn't know how you were going to put that stuff and where you were going to put it, so there is a method called getResourceText down here, which is an ugly thing, which does all sorts of messy stuff to retrieve a resource with the same name as the ribbon. But you don't have to do that, and I would suggest that everyone jettison that code and instead go to the properties of the project, bring up the resources pane. Notice there is at this point not a ribbon resource, but I can take my ribbon resource from my toolbox, and it should be right here, and just drag it over. When you drag that ribbon over, it adds it as a resource. And now in the code, this is so much easier. Let me save this. Now in the code, I don't have to call that messy, ugly procedure, which I thank them for writing, but it really isn't an easy thing to use or maintain. Just my.resources.ribbon1. And in C#, that's properties.resources.ribbon1. Same concept. So I can get at that ribbon using the my namespace or the properties class built into C#. So now we've got everything hooked up to display that ribbon. But yet the ribbon doesn't do anything yet. If I ran it now, we'd see the ribbon button. Okay, we have to try it, right? Let's try it. If I press F5 to run, we'll see that button there, but it just doesn't have any code yet hooked up to do anything. So if I go to the View tab, where did I put this? I really don't remember where. Oh, it's on Cert. That's where it is. Northwind Task Pane. There it is. There's our customization, but I can click it all I like. It's just not going to do anything because it isn't yet hooked up to any code. So what I want to do is hook it up to code that will do two things. If you click it, it will display the task pane. If you unclick it, it will hide the task pane. And if a user closes the task pane, it will reset the state of this button for us. So we need to add all that behavior. Let's get out of here and let's go add that code. I'm going to need a procedure to make that happen. So I'm going to add here the code that I need. I'm going to have a getPressed procedure which will handle when the user clicks that button. And that getPressed procedure is going to, actually no, that's the wrong procedure, I got confused. The getPressed procedure is the one that the ribbon will use to interrogate whether it should appear pressed or not. As the ribbon displays itself, it calls this method to say, hey, should I show this button pressed or not pressed? And what we're going to do is get the visible state of our custom task pane. And depending on whether that's visible or not, we'll press or unpress that button automatically. Now here's the code we'll run when the user clicks the custom task pane. That is, we'll set the visible property of our custom task pane to match the isPress parameter which gets passed to this by the ribbon handling code, and that's either true or false. Now I'm going to need some way to invalidate that button so it refreshes its display. We'll have a call to the invalidate control method of the ribbon telling it to refresh the display of our toggle button so that we can programmatically force it to show itself as pressed or unpressed or so on. Okay. Well, to make this all hook together, we need one more little bit of code, and that is we need the code in our add-in itself which tracks whether or not the user has closed the custom task pane. Well, luckily, there is an event that occurs when the user shows or hides the custom task pane, and that is the handle visible changed event. Now, so when the user opens or closes the task pane, we're going to call the ribbon.refresh method, that's the method we just saw, which will force the ribbon to refresh the display of that control, and when it refreshes the display of that control, it will get the value of whether it should be pressed or not based on the user changing the value of the custom task pane. Unfortunately, we have to hook this event handler up. So I need one more version of this startup code. So I'm going to take this and replace it with my last version, which is only one line of code different. It calls the add handler statement to hook up the visible changed event of the custom task pane and have it set it up to call this procedure when the user changes the visible state of that task pane. For a C# developer, that would just be ctp.visibleChanged plus equals the address of this procedure. Okay, so we're all done. We've hooked everything up. I should be able to save this and run it. Now, I will add one more thing. It's generally not a good idea to have your own custom task pane visible when you first start the application. It's kind of rude, I think. Like every person that ever starts PowerPoint on my computer from now on is going to see that task pane. But it's demoware, so I'll live with it. Let me go insert one to make sure that still works. Great. I can go to the Insert tab here, and if I click this, I must not have initialized this correctly, and I must not have, oh, of course not. I meant to do that too. Laugh, Mike, that's okay. I meant to do that too, because what did I forget to do? I forgot to tell the ribbon customization that it should use that handler. I didn't put that in there before because we didn't have the handler. At this point, I need to replace all this. Let me delete it. With this version, which adds on these attributes, which explains what to do in case the ribbon needs to toggle the state of the button, and if the user toggles the state of the button. The getPressed attribute says, what should I call when I need to determine whether this button is pressed or not? And onAction says, what should I call when the user actually clicks the button? Okay, save it once again, and now it actually will work correctly. All right, here it goes. There's our task pane. Insert tab. Look, it's pressed as it should be. If I unpress it, the task pane goes away. If I press it again, the task pane appears. This is the kind of wonderful behavior you'd expect from any custom task pane. Watch this magic. If I manually close a task pane, oh look, I'm a user. I don't need this task pane anymore. I'll close it now. The button unpresses itself, as it should, so you can tell the state of that task pane from that button. Phew, that's a lot of stuff. And if someone's out there listening and wants to recreate this, at some point, Mike will get this white paper posted, and I'll stop harping on that at this point and get back to our actual presentation, handing control back over to Mike.
That was great, man.
It was fun, too, and it actually worked, more or less.
And I was doing the ooh-ahs for everybody.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so toward the last 10 minutes or so there's a couple of things I wanted to ask you that you could pass on to these kind folks. What are the top 3 things you think developers should know about using VSTO?
I can do 4. One of them is you really should try it. It's free. Go download it. Just give it a try. Take some application you're using VBA code to handle events of Word, Excel, PowerPoint, or something, and just try replacing bit by bit parts of it with managed code. Okay, but here's one thing. Before Visto, and I've done a lot of automation between managed code and Office applications that fought many battles. Without Visto, developers are on their own having to deal with implementing the IDT Extensibility 2 interface if you want to create your own shared add-in. And you can still do that in Visual Studio 2005 with Office 2007. If you just don't want to use Visto for some reason I don't understand, you can create your own shared add-in in Visual Studio and you can implement IDT Extensibility 2, but believe me, it's a pain. Moving on. Without Visto, developers have to deal with, and this is in terms of automating Office applications, you have to deal with starting and stopping the host application. And if you've never dealt with dealing with the garbage collector and make sure Excel gets itself out of memory, you know it's a pain. I can remember very clearly back in 2003 or so trying to write an application which inserted data into Excel, and I was testing on my machine, and my machine got slower and slower and slower. And at one point I brought up the task manager and saw that I had 34 copies of Excel running because I had not successfully managed to shut down Excel. With Visto, that is never a problem, especially because if you're writing an add-in, the user's in charge of shutting down Excel, not your app. You'll never shut down Excel or Word or whatever. And finally, top 3 things you should know. Let me give you a hint. If you want to do a ribbon customization, I ask you this. Where else are you going to put that ribbon customization? You got to have some place to put it and load it from. And if you don't do it with the Visto add-in, you'll be struggling to find an easy place to do it. Sure, in a Word, Excel, or PowerPoint document, you can place it into the body of the file itself, but only if you're using a docx file, and it's a pain. You got to hook it up yourself. In Visto, they just magically hook it all up. And that, for me, makes it worth the price of admission, which is, by the way, did I mention, free. Okay, those are my 3 things.
Cool. Now, what are the top 3 tips or tricks you think developers should know about using VSTO?
You know, and people are thinking, how did he think of those so fast? I will confess, Mike told me these questions before we got together. So, top 3 tips or tricks, I don't know if these are the top 3. I will provide 3. One of them is don't show the custom task pane at startup. It's just rude. I said that already. Just remember, you can add the button, let the user show it, unless it's the main focus of your application. Second, you didn't notice this and I didn't talk about it, but it's important that you have a reference to the ribbon itself from within the ribbon class. Now, Visto hands this to you. It is a place in the code. I would go back to the demo, but it's too much trouble. There's a place in the code they create that hands to you in that ribbon class a variable that refers to the actual ribbon that you're modifying. You need that. In the code we just saw, I did a refresh on that ribbon, and you might need to do that to force a button to refresh its behavior. If you don't have that reference to the ribbon, you can't get it later, and you've lost control. So make sure you don't delete that or say, I don't need this, I'm not going to use it, and remove it from your code. You definitely need that if you're ever performing any ribbon customization. I found this out the hard way. I was doing an add-in that wasn't Visto back before Visto, and I didn't have a reference to the ribbon, and I spent probably a day trying to figure out how to get that ribbon to refresh, and finally realized I see the reference to it. And the load event of the ribbon hands it to you, and Visto passes it to you as well. And the final thing is another dig at the Office team. I'm sorry, Mike. PowerPoint 2003. PowerPoint, if you're going to work with PowerPoint, the PowerPoint object model is incredibly opaque. It's not easy to figure out how to find anything. You would just figure you want to put text into a portion of a slide. You just go and slam the text in, but you can't. You have to go find a slide, then a text frame, then a text range, and then the text. It's a pain. Now, in PowerPoint 2003, there was this cool macro recorder. So you could, in the UI, do what you wanted to do while you're recording a macro, go look at the VBA code they generate, and see how the object model works. You would never run macro recorded code, but it was really useful for learning about the object model. Guess what feature has been removed from PowerPoint 2007? Go ahead, Mike. What's been removed?
The macro recording.
Huh. And you got to wonder, why? Where did it go? We don't know the answer to this question. It never helps. I've learned in Microsoft land, asking why never gets you anywhere. So I don't know why. We're not going to find out why. It's not there. You need the macro recorder. So what I've found is very helpful is to keep PowerPoint 2003 installed on my computer. No reason not to have 2003 and 2007 on the same computer. When I want to learn something about the object model, I run 2003, see what they do, and then take that code and use it in Manage Code in Visto. It's a really useful tool. Word and Excel still contain them. PowerPoint doesn't. You'll have to use the old version to get that functionality. So that's my tips.
Cool. So we got. Do we have any closing remarks? Anything lastly you want us to tell the kind audience here?
I do. I think there's a lot of people who could use Visto 2005 and don't even know that it exists. Of course, they're not here today either, so they still don't know it exists. But the fact is that once Orcus comes out, whenever that is, and Visto products, those add-ins and document-centric customizations. We've done add-in or application-level customizations. Orcus will have both add-in and document-level customizations. Are right there in the toolbox, and you can't get rid of them. They're just there. I think more people will realize, hey, I can write managed code that programmatically controls PowerPoint, Excel, InfoPath, Outlook, etc. I think that's when this product will really reach critical mass. It's been a long time coming. It's a great product. This team has done amazing work. I'm not even on the team, and I can say that. Amazing work. I think finally people will notice it in the next version.
Yes, I think you're quite right. I think it's evolving quite well.
So all I can say is when I go to conferences and speak on Visto, people are there. They always come. The room is packed, and they also, wow, I didn't know I could do that. So.
Yeah, and you know, when I've spoken to conferences and I show some of the data binding stuff, like the stuff you showed, especially if there's a lot of SQL Server folks in the audience, their jaws just drop like 6 feet.
And what I didn't get to show is that cool feature where you can drag a stored procedure from the Server Explorer onto an Excel spreadsheet. And the Visto guys just generate placeholders for the parameters, like a text box you can type parameters in, and a list object to hold the results. It's just pure magic.
You know, Ken, we'll just have to do another webcast, you and I, where we do more data stuff.
Okay.
Because there's so much fun stuff that you can do with the VSTO and data.
Yeah, love the product.
So next steps, as Ken said, download VSTO 2005 SE, and you can do that from the VSTO Developer Center. And obviously, we'd like you to try building new solutions with the 2007 Office system. We do have a forum, a VSTO forum on Msdn, and it's monitored quite frequently by members of the team and MVPs and third-party experts. There's a number of VSTO-related blogs, and they'll be toward the end of this slide deck. And we have a number of developer events that are coming up throughout this part of the year and the end of the year that we will be participating in, such as TechEd and VS Live and Dev Connections and things of that nature. So we certainly hope to see you there. There's the site for the Dev Center and the 2005 SE webpage. And I also like to include the link to the help documentation on Msdn, because I think our user education team has done a great job in providing help documentation for our product.
Mike, would you mention, Mike, that I never understand why you got these links on the slides and we go through them real fast. The people here can print the deck, right?
Yes.
There's an option to print this deck, so you have these links. So.
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Yes. Yes. I'm not just wanting you to see if you can memorize them in 30 seconds or less.
So fast.
There's also the news groups, and there's, again, just a ton of blogs done by various members of the team, and I've got one, and I need to write to it anytime soon again, as a matter of fact. So with this, we'll turn over to Tracy, and we're going to take a couple of quick questions and stuff. We've got a few minutes left.
Excellent. Thanks, Mike.
Sure.
As a reminder, and like Ken said, you can do a printed PDF of the slides. To do that, just go to the File menu in your upper navigation bar. Now we're going to be getting to the questions and answers here shortly, so please feel free to submit them into the Q&A panel found at the bottom of your live meeting screen. Also, I'm going to be posting a survey here in just a minute. Now, if you would all please take a moment to fill it out before you log off. We do appreciate your feedback. As a reminder, for upcoming and previously recorded webcasts, you can visit Microsoft.com/webcast. This webcast will be available for download in about 24 hours. Now, if you have any webcast content ideas, if there's something out there that you would like to see and haven't yet, we would love to hear from you. Just take note of this link here. And for anybody who's interested in receiving a free 14-day trial of Microsoft Office Live Meeting, you'll want to visit Microsoft.com/presentlive. And now for filling out that survey today, you're going to be automatically entered in to win this 30-gigabyte Zune digital media player.
Can I win?
Oh, unfortunately you can't, Ken. It's a great giveaway though, huh? And here is the survey. Please follow the links provided to complete today's webcast evaluation. And Mike and Ken, looks like you have some questions waiting there for you.
Yep. Let's take the one here. It says, in addition to installing Visual Studio 2005 Team Suite, what else needs to be installed to set up a development environment for Office development?
You don't need Team Suite, right?
No. Well, I take that back. Depending. If you're going to work with Visual Studio Tools for Office 2005,
not SE.
Not SE, you can either get it via Team Suite or as a standalone product. If you want to do strictly Office 2000 development right now, as long as you own a copy of Visual Studio Professional, Visual Studio 2005 Professional, you can download Visual Studio Tools for Office 2nd Edition from the Dev Center and use that. Now, obviously, the only other thing you need is the 2007 Office system itself.
Right, and we should reiterate that Visual Studio Tools for Office 2005 creates document-centric customizations, and we didn't talk about that today at all.
No, we didn't actually.
2005 SE creates only add-ins, which are application-level customizations, and that's what's free.
Yep. And then there's another question here with VSTO. Are there any advantages of using VB over C# other than optional parameters?
Well, please let me answer.
Oh, go right ahead. Jump right in.
It is way easier using VB than C# because of not only optional parameters, well, because of optional parameters basically. You'll find that a method that you use often may have no required parameters. So in VB, you can just say call the method. In C# you have to go find values for all of those. That's not a problem really in PowerPoint or Excel, which have modern object models. When you want to program against Word, everything is passed by ref and they're all objects, which makes creating the code in C# awfully ugly. The question next is, are there any books on Visto actually? Funny you should ask.
There's tons.
Well, there's two really good ones that I know of, both by members of the team. I'm sure there are others as well.
Well, there's three really good ones that you know of.
There are. Did I forget one? Okay.
Yes, you did.
Okay, well, there's the Eric Carter, Eric Lippert book.
Right, and they've got a version both for C# and for VB.
Right, and there's the Kathleen McGrath and Paul Stubbs wrote a book.
Yep, that's VSTO for Mere Mortals.
And is there another one?
Yes, and in fact, if you'll allow me just a second here.
Mike will go search for it, and while he's searching, we'll go on to the next question, because he'll find the other book on Visto. But yes, they are, and both of the ones that I mentioned before, I haven't seen the third one. Both of those two are excellent books. I would highly recommend both of them. And they overlap some, but not completely, so there's a reason to have both.
And in fact, what's good about the three books that we just mentioned just now, VSTO for Mere Mortals is great if you're just starting out with VSTO.
Right.
And what I find really nice about it is it gives you a great introduction, and it's meaty and stuff, and especially if you're an old VBA developer, it talks to you very well. And then from that book, it's very easy to then move into the ones by Eric Carter and Eric Lippert because they start getting more knee-deep into things.
Right. The next question is, if we don't want to wait for the white paper for the demo to be posted, is there any way we could get it? I don't think I can send out the white paper. I don't have a finished edited version. I can send out the demo if someone sends me email. My email is pretty easy to find out there in the world. So if someone wants it, it's pretty easy. Just send me email. I will get it to you.
And there's a can you quickly recap how you set up the code snippet?
Oh, yeah, it's easy. I created that PowerPoint add-in, and it just copied or dragged and dropped each of the snippets I wanted to paste onto the toolbox. You can drag onto the toolbox. Once they're there, I would right-click and choose Rename and give them a name so I could remember which one was which. But that's all it takes.
Now, interestingly enough, there's two ways to do snippets. There's the way that you've done it where you've got them on the toolbox.
Yes.
There's also a feature in Visual Studio called Insert Snippets.
Yes, but creating those snippets is a lot more effort.
Oh, no. I found the easy way to do it.
Uh-huh.
You know me. I'm not big on writing a lot of code or a lot of process, right?
Yeah.
So I took one complex snippet that I wrote.
Yeah. And you get the XML, and you go cut and paste into that, right?
Exactly.
Right. So of course, I've done that too. But the problem is, it still requires managing a bunch of files and stuff. So for a demo like this technique works. But don't count on this in the real world, because what happens is it's really easy to reset the toolbox.
Exactly. Which is why
reset the toolbox and you lose your snippets.
Which is why I use the insert snippet method.
Yes.
Because then you never lose them.
Okay.
Because they're stored in a particular folder.
That's correct.
Good
You're
stuff.
next, Mike.
Would this work with SQL Server 2000 and only SQL Server 2005? Good question.
It works with both. Moving on.
Does it? Okay.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah, because I've only ever used SQL Server 2005 for the longest time now. So.
Yeah, I'm using 2000 on my machine. It works fine. Actually, at the moment I'm using SQL Express, which is 2005, but it does work with 2000 as well. Someone asked, where can we find more information on how to create and work with ribbons? Well, there is a person in the UE team named Frank Rice who has written a bunch of stuff on this. He has a blog which covers it. He and I collaborated on 3 white papers, so if you search for his name or mine and ribbon, you'll find a lot of stuff. So I think that's a good place. There's a bunch of stuff online. Anything to add to that, Mike?
Nope.
Okay, you're next.
Does Orca support server-side printing of Office formats? Not that I know of, but I'm not sure entirely.
No, because Orcus is only for Vista support, so there's no UI features built into Orcus that change the way Office 2007 works. So if Office 2007 now supports server-side printing, then it will in Orcus as well, right?
One would think, huh?
We're not changing. I have nothing to do with it.
Right.
They're not changing Office 2007.
You can do server-side document creation, which is good.
How about the next one? I'll let you handle this one.
Well, I know the beta is coming up soon. I don't quite know when the final version is coming up just yet. But I know that the beta is coming up, I think, around the TechEd timeframe.
That's correct. As far as I know, the first real beta is around TechEd. So I think so. Someone said, address to Stan, I'm sure that's me. It's not Stan, it's Ken, but that's okay. You talked about using Visto versus IDT extensibility with add-ins. Do you find that you can create WinForms as the main application to interact with Office apps with just Visto? Absolutely. That you can have a WinForm as part of your application, and you can display that from your add-in. So there's no reason to create a custom task pane. It's just another UI feature. I'm not spacing out, right, Mike? WinForms work fine, right? There's no reason you can't do this.
Yeah.
So the only deal is, what I didn't really point out is that Visto hands to you a reference to the host application. You can always use the globals class, which they generate, to get the globals.thisaddin.application from any code in the add-in. So whether it's on a Windows form or in a custom task pane, you can still get to the host application and do whatever the heck you want. So Windows forms work just fine in a Visto application. If you're using IDT extensibility to create a shared add-in, you got to do a little more effort. But sure, you can still use WinForms as the interface.
Okay.
Okay. Yikes, Mike. Can you read that real fast? It's a very long question.
Well, actually, I'm going to take 2 or 3 last of these, the ones that I can pick off the lower end of the branches real quick.
Oh, the low-hanging fruit.
Yes, because unfortunately I have yet another meeting to go to.
Oh, okay, so we need to finish up anyway.
Okay, so one of them is, can you comment on using VSTO versus VSTA with 2007 Office System? Visual Studio Tools for Office versus Visual Studio Tools for Applications. The latter is a second product that the team is creating, and it's basically to enable ISVs to provide extensibility for their products for their customers. So much like an ISV would have used VBA to provide extensibility for their product, they would now use VSTA because VSTA is in managed code, obviously. And VSTO is what you would use to create a broader range of applications versus something vertical like with the extensibility that I just said.
And we're really looking forward to the day when those vendors, those ISVs, become the Word, Excel, Office, and PowerPoint and Access teams and put Vista into Office itself.
Yep.
Someday, huh? Okay, I think we probably need to finish, right?
Yep. Another one real quick. Can you use VSTO 2005 SE with Click Once deployment? Click Once deployment is coming out with the new version.
So at this point, you're stuck with the manifest
base with the creating an MSI type of thing.
Right, and you have to do evidence, have security to run it, and deployment is an issue, right? It is an issue.
Yes.
Okay, so I think at this point we should tell people if they have other questions, they should email them to us.
Yes, please.
And do you have a way to post? Did we ever post the email addresses?
I don't know. Mine, I think, was at the beginning. I know I had to type it in. Okay. Mike.Hernandez@Microsoft.com.
And my address is keng@mcwtech.com. Easy to find on the web, though. Just Google, you'll find us.
Yeah, really.
So
we're everywhere. We're ubiquitous.
I think we're done, Mike.
All right, sir.
Thank you very much.
I want to thank Ken for joining us today. I want to thank everybody who joined us on the webcast. I certainly appreciate you taking the time to listen to us chat here about VSTO. And I will be doing 4 other expert chats with other good friends of ours, Paul Ballard and Tim Huckabee and Robert Green. And we hope to see you then. And once again, thank you so much. Tracy, thank you so much for everything.
Thank you. We're saying goodbye.
I want to extend a very special thank you to both you, Mike and Ken, for your presentation today and answering all the great questions we had come through the queue. With that, we'll wrap up today. This is the end of today's presentation. The audience may now disconnect from the audio portion of today's presentation.